Buddhism. What does Nirvana really mean? Back in the days of the Buddha, Nirvana, Nibbana, had a verb of its own, nibbūti. It meant to go out like a flame, because fire was thought to be in a state of entrapment as it burned, both clinging to and trapped by the fuel on which it fed. Its going out was seen as an unbinding. To go out was to be unbound. Sometimes another verb was used, parinibbuti, with the pari, meaning total or all around, to indicate that the person unbound, unlike fire unbound, would never again be trapped. Now that nirvana has become an English word, it should have its own English verb to convey the sense of being unbound as well. At present, we say that a person reaches nirvana or enters nirvana, implying that nibbana is a place where you can go. But nirvana is most emphatically not a place. It's realized only when the mind stops defining itself in terms of place, of here or there, or between the two. This may seem like a word chopper's problem. What can a verb or two do to your practice? But the idea of nirvana as a place has created severe misunderstandings in the past, and it could easily create misunderstandings now. There was a time when some philosophers in India reasoned that if nirvana is one place and samsara another, then entering into nirvana leaves you stuck. You've limited your range of movement, for you can't get back to samsara. Thus, to solve this problem, they invented what they thought was a new kind of nirvana, an unestablished nirvana, in which one could be in both places, nirvana and samsara, at once. However, these philosophers misunderstood two important points about the Buddha's teachings. The first was that neither samsara nor nirvana is a place. Samsara is a process of creating places, even whole worlds. This is called becoming, and then wandering through them. This is called birth. Nirvana is the end of this process. You may be able to be in two places at once. If your sense of self is infinite enough, you can occupy the entirety of space all at once, but you can't feed a process and experience its end at the same time. You're either feeding samsara or you're not. If you feel the need to course freely through both samsara and nirvana, you're simply engaging in more samsara-ing and keeping yourself trapped. The second point is that nirvana, from the very beginning, was realized through unestablished consciousness, one that doesn't come or go or stay in place. There's no way that anything unestablished can get stuck anywhere at all, for it's not only non-localized but also undefined. The idea of a religious ideal as lying beyond space and definition is not exclusive to the Buddha's teachings, but issues of locality and definition, in the Buddha's eyes, had a specific psychological meaning. This is why the non-locality of nirvana is important to understand. Just as all phenomena are rooted in desire, consciousness localizes itself through passion. Passion is what creates the there, on which consciousness can land or get established, whether the there is a form, feeling, perception, thought construct, or a type of consciousness itself. Once consciousness gets established on any of these aggregates, it becomes attached and then proliferates, feeding on everything around it and creating all sorts of havoc. Wherever there's attachment, that's where you get defined as a being. You create an identity there, and in so doing, you're limited there. Even if the there is an infinite sense of awareness grounding, surrounding, or permeating everything else, it's still limited, for grounding and so forth are aspects of place. Wherever there's place, no matter how subtle, passion lies latent, looking for more food to feed on. If, however, the passion can be removed, there's no more there. One sutta illustrates this with a simile: the sun shining through the eastern wall of a house and landing on the western wall. If the western wall, the ground beneath it, and the waters beneath the ground were all removed, the sunlight wouldn't land. In the same way, if passion for form, etc., could be removed, consciousness would have no where to land, and so would become unestablished. This doesn't mean that consciousness would be annihilated, simply that, like the sunlight, it would now have no locality. With no locality, it would no longer be defined. This is why the consciousness of nirvana is said to be without surface, anidasanam, for it doesn't land. Because the consciousness aggregate covers only consciousness that is near or far, past, present, or future, i.e. in connection with space and time, consciousness without surface is not included in the aggregates. It's not eternal because eternity is a function of time. And because non-local also means undefined, the Buddha insisted that an awakened person, unlike ordinary people, can't be located or defined in any relation to the aggregates in this life. After death, she can't be described as existing, not existing, neither or both, because descriptions can apply only to definable things. The essential step toward this non-local, undefined realization is to cut back on the proliferations of consciousness. This first involves contemplating the drawbacks of keeping consciousness trapped in the process of feeding. This contemplation gives urgency to the next steps, bringing the mind to oneness in concentration, gradually refining that oneness, and then dropping it to zero. The drawbacks of feeding are most graphically described in SN 12:63, A Sun's Flesh. The process of gradually refining oneness is probably best described in Amen 121, the Lesser Discourse on Emptiness, while the drop to zero is best described in the Buddha's famous instructions to Bahiya. In reference to the seen, there will be only the seen. In reference to the heard, only the heard. In reference to the sensed, only the sensed. In reference to the cognized, only the cognized. That is how you should train yourself. When for you there will be only the seen in reference to the seen, only the heard in reference to the heard, only the sensed in reference to the sensed, only the cognized in reference to the cognized. Then, Bahiya, there is no you in connection with that. When there is no you in connection with that, there is no you there. When there is no you there, you are neither here nor yonder nor between the two. This, just this, is the end of stress. With no here or there or between the two, you obviously can't use the verb enter or reach to describe this realization. Maybe we should make the word nirvana into a verb itself. When there is no you in connection with that you nirvana. That way we can indicate that unbinding is an action unlike any other, and we can head off any mistaken notion about getting stuck in total freedom. Names for Nibbana by Thanissaro Bhikkhu. As a young man, the Buddha had a vision of the world. All beings were like fish in a dwindling stream, fighting one another for a last gulp of water before they all died. Everywhere he looked for happiness, everything was already claimed. The implications of this vision struck terror in his heart. Life survived by feeding on other life, physically and mentally. To be interdependent is to inter-eat. The suffering that results serves no larger purpose, and so is totally pointless. This was the realization that drove him from home into the wilderness, to see if there might be a happiness that wasn't dependent on conditions, that didn't die, didn't need to feed. His awakening was the discovery that such a happiness did exist, a dimension touched by the heart and mind that was totally free from conditions. It wasn't the result of anything and didn't cause anything else. The path leading to that discovery was what he taught for the rest of his life. No single name did full justice to that dimension, so he named it largely with similes and analogies. The primary name was Nirvāṇa, Unbinding. This was an analogy based on the way fire was viewed at the time. Fire burns, agitated, trapped, and hot, because the fire element clings to its fuel. When it lets go of the fuel, it goes out, cool and unbound. But the Buddha gave his discovery more than 30 other names as well, to indicate ways in which it's really worth desiring, really worth all the effort that goes into attaining it. The names fall into 5 main groups, conveying 5 different facets of that dimension. The first is that it's not a blank of nothingness. Instead, it's a type of consciousness. But unlike ordinary consciousness, it's not known through the 6 senses, and it doesn't engage in fabricating any experience at all, unlike, for example, the non-dual consciousness found in formless levels of concentration. The Buddha described this consciousness as without surface and unestablished. His image for it is a beam of light that lands nowhere. Although bright in and of itself, it doesn't engage in anything and so can't be detected by anyone else. The second facet of this dimension is truth. Because it's outside of time, it doesn't change, doesn't deceive you, doesn't turn into something different. The third is freedom, free from hunger, free from suffering, free from location, free from restrictions of any kind. The fourth is bliss, unadulterated, harmless, and safe. The fifth facet is excellence, higher than anything known in even the highest heavens. In the Buddha's own words, it's amazing, astounding, ultimate, beyond. Even though this dimension is uncaused, a path of practice leads to it, in the same way that a road to a mountain doesn't cause the mountain, but following the road can get you there. The road is one thing, the mountain something else. Following the road involves fostering, among other things, generosity, virtue, mindfulness, concentration, and discernment. Through these qualities, we develop the wisdom and compassion to see that nirvana really is the wisest and most compassionate goal we can set for ourselves. Wise in that, unlike other goals, it's more than worth the effort and will never disappoint. Compassionate in that we not only remove our mouth from the feeding frenzy of interdependence, but we also show others who are disheartened by the pointlessness of suffering that there is a way out. It's for the sake of this goal that we meditate. The image of nirvana. We all know what happens when a fire goes out. The flames die down and the fire is gone for good. So when we first learned that the name for the goal of Buddhist practice, nirvana, nibbana, literally means the extinguishing of a fire, it's hard to imagine a deadlier image for a spiritual goal, utter annihilation. It turns out, though, that this reading of the concept is a mistake in translation, not so much of a word as of an image. What did an extinguished fire represent to the Indians of the Buddha's day? Anything but annihilation. According to the ancient Brahmins, when a fire was extinguished, it went into a state of latency. Rather than ceasing to exist, it became dormant and in that state, unbound from any particular fuel, diffused throughout the cosmos. When the Buddha used the image to explain nirvana to the Indian Brahmins of his day, he bypassed the question of whether an extinguished fire continues to exist or not, and focused instead on the impossibility of defining a fire that doesn't burn. Thus his statement that the person who has gone totally out can't be described. However, when teaching his own disciples, the Buddha used nirvana more as an image of freedom. Apparently, all Indians at the time saw burning fire as agitated, dependent, and trapped, both clinging and being stuck to its fuel as it burned. To ignite a fire, one had to seize it. When fire let go of its fuel, it was freed, released from its agitation, dependence, and entrapment, calm and unconfined. This is why Pali poetry repeatedly uses the image of extinguished fire as a metaphor for freedom. In fact, this metaphor is part of a pattern of fire imagery that involves two other related terms as well. Upadana, or clinging, also refers to the sustenance a fire takes from its fuel. Khanda means not only one of the five heaps, form, feeling, perception, thought fabrications, and consciousness, that define all conditioned experience, but also the trunk of a tree. Just as fire goes out when it stops clinging and taking sustenance from wood, so the mind is freed when it stops clinging to the khandhas. So the image underlying nirvana is one of freedom. The Pali commentaries support this point by tracing the word nirvana to its verbal root, which means unbinding. What kind of unbinding? The texts describe two levels. One is the unbinding in this lifetime, symbolized by a fire that has gone out but whose embers are still warm. This stands for the fully awakened arahant, who is conscious of sights and sounds, sensitive to pleasure and pain, but freed from passion, aversion, and delusion. The second level of unbinding, symbolized by a fire so totally out that its embers have grown cold, is what the arahant experiences after this life. All input from the senses cools away, and she is totally freed from even the subtlest stresses and limitations of existence in space and time. The Buddha insists that this level is indescribable, even in terms of existence or non-existence, because words work only for things that have limits. All he really says about it, apart from images and metaphors, is that one can have foretastes of the experience in this lifetime, and that it's the ultimate happiness, something truly worth knowing. So the next time you watch a fire going out, see it not as a case of annihilation, but as a lesson in how freedom is to be found in letting go.